Welcome to the fourth video in my 5-part series on the dialogue editor and how to create dialogues in general. In the last video, we started to take a look at conditional nodes and scripting nodes and how to use those to, for example, check if you've spoken to an NPC before, checking which choice you made in a dialogue, that sort of thing. And we also briefly looked at placeholder expression as well. In this video, the main thing we're going to focus on is how to create a quest dialogue. So I've created a simple quest where what's going to happen is you're going to talk to this guard. He's going to give you a quest. That quest is to kill this goblin. Once you kill the goblin, you'll be given an item. And then when you talk to the guard, you'll give him the item and that will complete the quest. There'll be a little bit more to the dialogue than just that, but as far as the quest is concerned, that's what the quest is. I'm going to assume you already know how to set up quests. I'm not going to go into that in this video because that's going to detract from the focus of the point of this video. If you're not sure how to make quests, I've already got a video on my dev page. I'll maybe put it in the description of this video. Starter guide to quests. That will cover not only dialogue, a little bit in there as well, but also how to set up quests. So we're going to focus in this video on the dialogue part of this quest that we're making, okay? So everything else is in place. The global properties that are needed, the scripts that are needed, for example, on death of the goblin that gives us the item, and the quest itself has already been set up. So everything's in place other than the dialogue, okay? So we're going to go into that now. So one of the things I've done ahead of time as well is I've set up I've put 2 frames onto this guard. One frame with the helmet and frame 2 where I've removed the helmet, okay? So in my startup script, I have in a reference to entity Jerry, which is that guard, dot frame equals 2. So at the start of the game, I'm setting his animation frame to the one where he doesn't have a helmet on, which you can see at the moment in the map editor, because I've set his initial frame. If we click on him, I've set his initial frame to 2, so that's why you can see him without the helmet, okay? Whereas this guard only has 1 frame, and that's with his helmet on, okay? So, I've gone ahead and taken portrait snaps of the characters. So if we go to the images section, I've got a portrait for my character. I'm not sure if we can actually preview them, so I won't be able to show you them just yet, but we'll go through, you'll see, and maybe if I open up the dialogue editor, you'll be able to see them. But I've got one for the player, I've got one for this guard and one for this guard. However, the one for this guard has the helmet on. So what I need to do is quickly take another portrait image. So I'm just going to load up this guard, set it to frame 2, and capture portrait of him without his helmet, and accept, and I'll just call this Jerry no helmet. Now in his portrait, I want to make sure it's still set to Jerry, and because that's going, him with the helmet is the main one, so we'll leave that as his actual portrait, okay? So now let's get to the dialogue and let's start putting all of this together. So we're going to click in the dialogue editor, we're going to click new, and we'll call this guard quest, okay? And the first thing we need to choose is how do we start this dialogue? Now again, as I said in video number 1, and I'm going to reiterate it here, plan your dialogue out first. So I've already done that. So because this is quite a sizable dialogue with quite a lot going on, I've pre-planned it all out. So I'm going to be following a plan. So I know which nodes I need and where I need them, okay? And as you'll see as we go through this, if I hadn't planned it out, it would have been a nightmare to, move things around afterwards. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain the process. I'm going to film myself making this dialogue, but I might cut certain parts out. Like if it's just me typing, dialogue chat in, then I might cut those bits out so you don't have to sit through all of it. But everything where I'm explaining what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, just so you can see as I'm building the dialogue as I go. So hopefully that will help you sort of get your head around how to use the dialogue editor by seeing somebody not only make dialogue, but explain why I'm doing the things the way I'm doing them, okay? So first thing I need to know is, what node do I start with? Well, I'm going to start with a condition node, because at the very beginning, I'm going to personally check for, have I spoken to this NPC before, which is the self property visited equals true. So I'm going to use that as the very first condition, okay? Now, I'm also going to be making use of sections in this particular dialogue. So I'm going to rename this to fetch quest, because that's what the majority of all of the fetch quest is going to be contained inside this section. But I'm going to create another section underneath that called, for now I'll just call it post quest, as in after the quest is over, okay? We'll come back to that once we've done the fetch quest dialogue. So first thing you need to know, you can build dialogues in any order you want, really, once you've got your plan. But typically what I'll do is I'll get all the conditions in place first, because you need to think about what sort of checks are you going to have that affect the flow of your dialogue. So because I know what conditions I need for my dialogue, I'm going to implement them first, and I'll walk you through what they are and why they are what they are, okay? So the first condition is, have we spoken to this NPC before? Visited equals true, okay? If we have spoken to the NPC before, then I need another condition. So what I'm going to do is drag a condition node into the then box. This condition is then going to check another property, which I'm going to set on self, which is, again, just to remind you, is a reference to, in this case, the entity we're talking to. So Jerry, quest accepted. So I'm going to put a property on Jerry at some point in this dialogue that sets whether I've accepted the quest or not. So I'm checking, have I accepted the quest? So first check is, have I spoken to him before? And then if I have, did I accept the quest? Okay. If I did accept the quest, then another condition I need in the then box of the condition. So drag a condition into the then box of this condition, let go. The next thing I want to check, and I'm going to click the wizard icon for this, is player's inventory contains a string. And we're going to change the string to the item ID for the item we want to check for. In this case, item 001. Okay, click OK. So that's this item here, the helmet. Okay. So then we check for, do you have the helmet in your inventory? If we do have the helmet in your inventory, then obviously we can then give that back to the guard. Okay. However, there's two instances where we're going to be without the helmet. The first instance is when we haven't gone and got it yet, okay? So we'll need a sort of check for that, which is kind of what this is doing, okay? But there's another instance where we won't have the helmet in our inventory, and that's when we've finished the quest. When we hand the helmet back to Jerry, he's going to take it back, and therefore is not going to be in our inventory anymore. So we need another condition in that scenario. So what we need to do is grab a condition, one more condition, and we need to place this in the else of this condition, not the then, but in the else of this condition, okay? So like that, okay? And this is going to be clicking on the wizard icon again, global property equals Boolean. And the global property I'm going to be using is one called quest one done. Okay. So let's just compact all of those for a moment so we can go through them. So these are the 4 checks that we've got. Have we spoken to the NPC before? If we have, did we accept the quest? If we did, do we have the item in our inventory? If we don't have the item in our inventory, is it because we completed the quest? That's what this is for, okay? If we do have the item in our inventory, then obviously a whole slew of other things will happen, okay? So for now, let's just focus on this first condition. Have we spoken to the NPC before? Okay. If we haven't spoken to the NPC before, then let's put an NPC node into the else. And as I say, I'm going to now fill in some dialogue. This is just going to be a quick back and forth between the NPC and the player. I'll probably put it on fast speed, or I might just cut to the next part where I talk. But in essence, all I'm going to be doing now is just filling in some example dialogue exchange between this character and the player. Okay? Okay, so we're now at a point where I'm going to put a player choice in. Okay, so we've reached a part of the dialogue now where he's asking us to do this quest. So I'm going to drag a player node in, and then I'm going to click the button here to make a choice out of it. So we'll, this will be the one where we accept the quest. So we'll say that, and then we'll just quickly fill in some more dialogue. Okay, so there's a quick little exchange once we've accepted the quest. So now what we need to do, this is the end of the first branch, if you will. We need to put a script node at the very end, just there. And this is going to set a couple of things. First of all, it is going to set the fact that we've spoken to the NPC, so visited true. What we're also going to do is just copy that. And on the next line down, we can also set quest accepted true, because we have accepted the quest. Okay. What we also need to do, because we've accepted the quest, is we need to give the quest. So give quest 0001. And that will give the quest to the player as well in their quest journal. Now, another thing that we need to do is on every one of these NPC nodes, because he doesn't yet have his helmet, is we need to set the portrait to custom, and I'm going to set Jerry no helmet. Okay, that's going to be his portrait, and I need to do that for each of these nodes where Jerry is talking at the moment when he doesn't have his helmet. Now that I've done that, let's deal with choice number 2, which is where we turn down the choice, and then the NPC can respond with, and this again needs to be Jerry no helmet, so he won't yet have his helmet. And then we need a player node, and then again we're at the end of this path, so we need a script node that's going to set the fact that we've spoken to Jerry now to true, so he won't repeat this whole dialogue about, will we help him. But instead, we're going to set quest accepted to false, because this is us turning that down. So quest accepted needs to be false. Validate and OK. So that's the whole of path 1, if you will. The path for if you haven't spoken to him yet. Then he says all of this, and then we get a choice. Depending on our choice, we can either say yes, in which case it will give us the quest and set the fact that we've spoken to him and taken the quest, or we can say no, in which case it will set the fact that we've spoken to him, but also set the fact that we didn't accept the quest. Okay? So if we have spoken to him, then let's open up the then. So we have spoken to him before. Then the next thing is, did we accept the quest? Did we take the quest on? Let's say we didn't. So that would be this node here. So let's put an NPC node in there, and we can say, please. And then at the end of that, we'll, again, this needs to be custom Jerry no helmet. But rather than repeating the choice, because what I want to do is allow the player to then change their mind and accept to do the quest. But again, rather than putting a duplicate copy of the choice in this path, what I'm going to do instead is put a GOTO node after this one that jumps us to, and I need to get the number of it, jumps us to here. Could you please go fetch it for me? And that's 11. So jump to 0011. So after saying please, he'll then say, could you please go fetch it for me? And we'll get the choice again. Okay. So that's what happens if we haven't accepted the quest. But what if we have? Then the next thing is, do we have the item in our inventory? Well, let's say for now we don't. So we'll deal with the else. And let's also deal with we don't yet have the quest done either. So we've accepted the quest, but we haven't done anything about it yet. So that would be an NPC node in this box here, because it would be we don't have the item and we haven't completed the quest. So that would be here, okay? So let's have him say something like, I am rooting, not rotting, I am rooting for you. You got this. And again, that's Jerry no helmet. And then we'll have the player respond with don't patronize me. And then that's that. So that's just going to happen when you're talking to him and he's waiting for you to complete the quest. So when you do have the item in your inventory, what's going to happen is he'll say something like, thank you so much. And then at the end of that, we'll put a script node. And this script is going to do a few things now, because this is basically the end of the quest. So the first thing we want to do is remove item 001. So just to remind you, this item gets given to us when we kill the goblin. So it will give item 001 when we kill the goblin. So at this point in the dialogue, it's now going to remove that item from the inventory. It's going to complete quest 0001. And self, which is a reference to Jerry, dot frame equals 1. So that's going to now show him with his helmet on as the model in game. And then what we'll also do is set global property. So global property quest 1 done to now be true, because we now effectively, that's the completion of the quest. Validate that and okay. Now what we also need to do is when he says you got it, that should be custom portrait Jerry no helmet. You get to see me in my helmet, of course. Custom Jerry no helmet. And that's the last piece of dialogue where you don't see him with his helmet. Okay. So now let's deal with the last remaining situation, which is what happens if you don't have the item in your inventory, but you have completed the quest. Well, that's where what we're then going to do is throw just a GOTO node into here. And this, instead of going to a node, is going to go to a section, and it's going to go to post quest. So now what we can do is we can collapse all of that, hide all of that. And let's just put an NPC node in here in the post quest section where he just says, thank you once again for fetching Roy helmet. And then the player, in fact, let's just do a message just for a variety. You grumble to yourself. So that's just going to be the post quest dialogue. So that's just going to loop over and over once the quest is done. Okay. So does that make sense? So let's just quickly take a look at the whole thing so you can see it. Let's collapse everything so you can see the structure. So as you can see, there's quite a bit to it, but hopefully me breaking it down step by step, explaining what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, has helped give you an insight into building out a dialogue like this. Okay. So I started out by planning out what are the conditions I need, and then I just basically filled in all the different conditions. That's the most sort of important part for your dialogue, is what's the things you're going to be checking every step along the way, and what order should you be checking them in. That's very important for dialogue, is what's the order, okay? So just think of it, just think it through in your mind. First thing I should check is, have I spoken to him before? If I have spoken to him, did I take the quest? If I've taken the quest, do I then have the item in my inventory? Or if it was a quest to kill someone, if I've taken the quest, have I now killed the goblin? Have I now set that property to true? And then, at the very end of that, in this case, have I completed the quest? If I have, then it should jump out of the main dialogue and into the end section. Okay, so in other words, change topic completely at the end of that. Okay, so let's save that dialog and go to the map, click on Jerry, and set the dialog on him, start dialog on interacts to guard quest. Let's save that and let's give it a test and see how it looks. So here's Jerry without his helmet. If we click on Jerry, we see his portrait without a hat, without a helmet. Hey, can you do me a favor? You're not about to give me a fetch quest, are you? You see that goblin over there? Thieving swine stole my helmet. You are about to give me a fetch quest. I can't go get it. I have to stay at my post. Could you please go fetch it for me? And then we get a choice. We can either resign ourselves to getting the helmet, or we can say, sorry, get your own helmet. So let's start with that, because we can choose this later. So let's say, sorry, get your own helmet. And he says, please, look, he's right over there. Quickest fetch quest you'll ever do. That's what they always say. Okay, so there's our sort of first initial interaction of dialogue. So what's happened at the end of that is it's set the fact that we visited him to true. So he's not going to repeat any of that dialogue anymore. But also it's set the fact that we didn't accept the quest. So now he should be asking us to keep doing the quest. So if we click on him and say, please, and then we have a GOTO node, which is going to jump us back to where he says, could you please go fetch it for me? So it goes back to that point in the dialogue. So we can now choose to, okay, let's go get his helmet. So we'll select that. It says, thank you so much. I'll make it worth your while. You won't regret this. I already am. And now that what that's done is that's given us the quest. So if we take a look in our log, we should have checked beforehand that we didn't have it, but you can see it's there. Retrieve helmet, retrieve Jerry's helmet from the thieving goblin. That's also set the fact that we've now accepted the quest. Obviously, if we look in our inventory, we don't have the item in our inventory. We also haven't completed the quest yet. So if we talk to him now, he should be routing us onward. And he says, I'm rooting for you. You got this. Don't patronize me. Okay. And that's just going to keep going on until we have the item in our inventory. Okay. Now we get the item on inventory when we kill the goblin. So let's do that next. And there we go. We can see we've just been given the guard's pilfered helmet. So now we've got the item in our inventory. Let's go talk to Jerry again. And he says, you got it. Thank you so much. Yeah, I just want my reward. What is my reward? You get to see me in my helmet, of course. And then we're speechless about that. Now, if you look at the portrait, all throughout that dialogue, he didn't have his helmet on. Okay, but now if you look at Jerry in the model, suddenly he's got his helmet on because we changed his frame to 1 again. If we look in the inventory, the helmet's been removed, the quest's been completed, and behind the scenes, global property quest 1 done has been set to true. So now when we talk to Jerry, a few things to note for. First of all, we no longer have the item in our inventory, so that check is going to fail again because we're not going to have the item in our inventory. But this time the quest property will be done, will be true. So it will do a different branch this time, which is the one for jumping out of the fetch quest section topic and into the post quest topic, where he's just going to be saying, thank you for getting my helmet. Now, I didn't set a custom portrait on those particular nodes, so he should have his helmet on in the portrait. And there he does. Thank you once again for fetching my helmet. You grumble to yourself. And every time you click on him now, that's just going to be the dialogue that happens because of the fact that you no longer have the item in your inventory, but you have completed the quest. Okay? So that's an example of how to create a, admittedly very simple, but hopefully, you can see how sort of fleshed out the dialogue was. Let's take one last look at the dialogue editor, just so you can see the end result. So you can see there's, quite a bit going on, but hopefully you were able to follow along with this and get the gist of how this is sort of coming together. Let's go through another example very quickly. Let's create a bit of dialogue for Toll. Okay, so I'm going to create a new dialogue and I'm going to call this guard goblin And this is going to start again with a condition node. We're going to leave just one section because I want to show you in this example another way of ending dialogue when you're finished with it. So one way is to use the GOTO node and jump out of a section, but I'll show you another thing that you can do as well. So with this one, I don't want to check whether we've spoken to him before or not. I want to check global property equals Boolean, okay? And I want to check a global property goblin dead. That's the same global property that gets set when we kill the goblin. I want to check if that's been set to true. So that will allow us to have a way for Tom to know whether we've killed the goblin or not. So if we haven't killed the goblin yet, then we'll just have Tom say, I'm watching you, okay? If we have killed the goblin, let's have just a humorous exchange where Tom says, did you just kill that goblin? We can then respond with, yes, why? And then he can respond with, he was my sister's boyfriend. And then one other thing I want to show as an example in this dialogue is let's bring in another NPC node. But this time, instead of using the initiating NPC, which in this case is Tom, because that's who we've clicked on, that's who we're talking to, with this node, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it to entity ID, and I'm going to type in Jerry. So we can have Jerry join this conversation. So Jerry can pipe in and say, he was a thieving swine, is who he was, stole my helmet. And then we'll have one more response from Tom, where he can say something like, that's your fault for not having just a single frame. So, and then at the end of that, we'll have a script. And with this script, I'll show you an alternate way of ending a dialogue so it doesn't repeat. So one way is to use the set visited true, and, you know, if you have spoken to him before, then, you know, have a different path. But another thing that you can do is, instead of doing that, in a script, you can say filter for dialogue and add a set dialogue function in, like that. We can set the entity to self, because again, we're talking to Tom, and it's Tom who we want to affect. And we can set the dialogue file to none, okay? And click validate. And what that will effectively do in this case is remove this dialogue file from being set on Tom. So once this is all played out, he effectively won't be able to talk to you anymore. You won't be able to click on him and start a conversation, because this script bit here will then remove that dialogue from Tom. Now, it's also worth mentioning that you can also use this same function to actually just change the dialogue file. So for example, let's do that. Let's actually make actual use of that. We'll save this dialogue. We'll create one more where we'll call it guard post dead, just to give it, you know, example name. It doesn't matter what it's called. And this can just literally be an NPC node. And it's just going to be Tom saying, something like that. So, and then what we'll do is, this is called guard post dead. So in our guard goblin dialogue, at the end where we set dialogue self, we can set that to guard post dead. And that will just completely change the dialogue file. So now he can only say that particular node over and over and over again, because we physically changed which dialogue file that particular entity is even using, okay? So it can't do any of these checks or any of these nodes because it's an entirely different file, okay? So let's just set that on Tom so we can see what that looks like. So when player interacts, start dialogue, guard goblin for that one. Save that. Quick play. So now let's talk to Tom. We haven't killed the goblin yet, so he's just going to say, I'm watching you. And he's going to keep saying that until goblin dead property equals true. Okay, so let's go kill the goblin. Just so it makes sense, let's talk to Jerry and complete his quest. So he's got his helmet back on, and his portrait has his helmet. So we just have to accept his quest. So, okay. Now we've got this helmet, so you got it. And there we go. And if we talk to Jerry, thank you once again for fetching my helmet. You grumble to yourself. So we've now effectively completed Jerry's quest. But as a result of completing Jerry's quest, we just killed the goblin. So if we now talk to Tom, did you just kill that goblin? And then we say, yes. Why? He was my sister's boyfriend. And then the next node is Jerry's node. So he's going to chime in now. There he is. His portrait has changed. He was a thieving swine is who he was. He stole my helmet. And then Tom will respond, that's your fault for not having just a single frame. Now, that's the end of that dialogue, okay? Now, at the end of that, there was a script node that said set dialogue on Tom, in this case, to a completely different dialogue file. So now if we talk to Tom, I can't believe you killed that goblin. And that's all he's going to say because that's all that's in that dialogue file, okay? So that's another way of having dialogue change at certain points in your dialogue. You can either have different sections in your dialogue that you jump to, or you can just have a script node that says at this point, just go to a different dialogue file. For me, I kind of prefer that because it then guarantees you're not going to get any dialogue nodes that you shouldn't have because you're in an entirely different file at that point, right? So I prefer to kind of work that way, but you know, you do. I wanted to show both so that you can decide which one works best for you. So this Jerry's example shows you how to use the GOTO node to jump out of a section if a condition is met. The Tom's just shows you that at the end of a dialogue, you can then just flip to a different file completely, okay? So the last thing I want to show before we end out this particular video is introducing something I haven't covered yet, which is conditional branch nodes or conditional choice nodes, sorry, okay? So let me show you the difference between them and what they are and how you use them. So here we are back in the dialogue editor. Now, in case you're confused, when I say conditional choice nodes, obviously this is a condition node. We've been using them not only in this script, but also quite a lot in the quest script. Okay, these are condition nodes here. Now, condition choice nodes are very different. Okay, they're a different thing and they're used for a completely different purpose. Okay. These condition nodes are used for just checking, you know, have you done something yet in the game? And if you have, then go down a completely different path. Condition choice nodes dictate whether a certain player choice should be visible to the player or not, depending on a condition. Okay? Now, in case you're wondering what that means, in layman's terms, if you've played any role-playing games, like, for example, Baldur's Gate 3, which is, you know, quite a new game, so if you've been playing that, then this should be recently familiar to you. Let's take Baldur's Gate 3 as an example. If you've played any role-playing games like that, then if your character has a certain race or a certain high enough level in something, then certain choices in dialogue will be available to you, okay? So that's what condition choice nodes are. So let me give you an example of how to do those. So in my stats tab, I've created a custom stat called persuasion, okay? And I've left it as the default. So just to show you how I did that, all I did was go to the stats tab, clicked add a new one, and I typed in persuasion, okay? And let's say the maximum is 200, something like that. Okay, so there's our custom stat, okay? And then what we'll do, we'll just make a very quick example dialogue called guard persuasion. And we'll start with a NPC node. We don't need to, we won't actually do any other scripting with this dialogue. We'll just do the condition stuff. So let's have the guard say halt you shall not pass. Where have you heard that before? And we can have a player choice, okay? So the player can either say, why not? And then the guard can respond with, this is a restricted area, okay? And then that can end that particular branch of dialogue, okay? However, this node, what we'll do is, I'm also going to introduce you to something that you can also do in dialogue, which is you can change the color of text. So here's how to do that. You put color inside square brackets, okay? And inside the square brackets also type equals, so color equals, and then you're going to put a hex code. So hex code starts with an asterisk or a hashtag symbol, whichever you want to call it, okay? And then it uses RGB values. So this would be an example of a hex code, okay? So these two numbers denote red, these two denote green, and those last two denote blue. So RGB, red, green, blue, okay? The values go from 0, which is nothing, to F, which is full, or full value, okay? Full color. So effectively what we're doing here is we're saying 0 red, full green, no blue. So this effectively is the color green. I think you can also, but your mileage may vary, also type a color in. But I'm not sure 100% whether it needs to be in quotes or whether it doesn't. And also, I'm not sure what text is recognized. But certainly, if you can get used to the hashtag system, you can obviously look it up online, get your color converted to what the hashtag would be, or the hex code, sorry, what the hex code would be. But anyway, in this case, I'm going to use green. And then I'm going to type persuasion, colon, and then to close out the color, you do very much like HTML, you would do a hashtag. Why am I so focused on hashtag? You would do \color, yeah? So this starts the color and sets it to green, and then this would stop it being green, okay? And then we'll say something like, and then we will have the NPC respond with like they've been mind controlled or something, okay? So we need to now make it so that this node, this choice, is only visible to the player if they have a high enough persuasion. Well, you'll notice there's a tick box here, only visible if a condition is met. So if we tick that, that means that we can specify a condition inside this box here, this section here, that will dictate whether this is visible to the player or not. So what we're going to do is we're going to click the wizard expression builder icon. We're going to say, now stat unfortunately isn't in the list, but we can use player property greater than number. And then I'm just going to change this to player.stat, open and close square brackets, open and close speech marks inside the square brackets, persuasion, and then we'll check if it's greater than 50, let's say. Okay, click OK on that. So now this node will only be visible to the player, and therefore their ability to choose it and all of the things that happen after it will only be visible if our persuasion stat, in this case, is above 50. Obviously, other things you could do is this could be your currency. So you could choose to buy something, but that option would only be visible to you and therefore able for you to buy something if you have enough money for that item, for example. It might be the ability to bribe someone, but you can only bribe them if you have enough money for that option to even be available. Do you have enough health? Have you killed a particular entity? Again, same thing again, you could check global property is true or not. And that could be, have you killed the goblin? This option would only be visible if you've done that thing. So anything that, if you want an option in the dialogue for the player to choose, but it's only visible if a certain game event has happened, or if a certain bit of game data is relevant, in this case, a high enough stat, then this is how you do that. You tick this box here, only visible if a condition is met, and then you specify what the condition should be upon which this would be visible. In this case, the persuasion stat being greater than 50, okay? So if we save this dialogue, and we quickly set this on Tom. So what was that? That's guard persuasion. And let's just quickly go into game and quickly show this in effect. So before we go any further, if I just quickly bring down the console and I print the current value for player.stat persuasion, we can see it's 0, which is less than 50, okay? So that option should not be visible when we talk to Tom. So if we click on Tom, he says, halt, you shall not pass. And the only thing available to us, because we don't have a high enough persuasion, is why not. So we'll say why not, and he'll say this is a restricted area, okay? And that will just keep happening because we just don't have a high enough persuasion, okay? Let's walk away from him for a second. Let's bring down the console again, but this time let's type player.stat persuasion. And let's set it to, let's say, 60. So it's above 50, okay? That's all we needed. We could have set it to 51, doesn't matter. But it's now above the required amount. So now if we talk to Tom again, all of a sudden, we have a second option that wasn't there before, which is there now. And you can see persuasion is in green. So that's the result of that color text that we put in there. And then in this case, we can say, you know, you shall let me pass. And of course, he says, I shall let you pass. And then obviously you can have anything you want to have happen at that point, like the door opens or a path gets unblocked or something that you couldn't access before. And as I say, you can do all sorts of things with those types of conditional choice nodes. Do you have enough money for an option to be available? Do you have high enough skill? Are you a certain race? You know, do you have a particular name? Whatever you want to do, anything you want to check for. And that will allow you to have options that are only visible and therefore usable to the player upon those requirements, upon those conditions. Okay? So that will bring us to the end of this video. Wow, it's been quite a meaty one, this video, covering quest dialogue and a series of other things as well. So hopefully you were able to keep up with the quest dialogue example. If you have any questions about that, of course, feel free to ask on the Discord. In the next video, we're actually going to deviate away from the dialogue editor and we'll take a look at the scripting things to know about dialogue. How to start dialogue in scripts, how to set dialogue in scripts. We've kind of already covered that, but we'll just quickly go over it one more time because it's relevant for scripting. And then we'll also talk about how to script an entire dialogue, not in the dialogue editor, but in the script editor. I'm also going to talk about why, in some cases, that's beneficial, but I'm also going to reveal the secret, if you will, to the dialogue editor, which some of you may not even realize. So yeah, stay tuned for that. But anyway, for now, that will wrap up this video. Thanks for watching.